Welcome, Mr. Michael Platzer. This is Karen Smith, and I'm here with the chair of the Vienna Alliance of NGOs in Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. He's also a number of other things. One of those is relevant for what we're going to be talking about right now, which is the 75th annual meeting of the American Society of Criminology that's going to be taking place in San Francisco in November of 2019. So I'd like to welcome you, and perhaps you can just give a little bit of a, very brief background about you and how you got involved in what is happening later on this year.
Well, as many people know, I've been involved with the United Nations now for over 40 years in different capacities. I've also been involved with the International Commission on Prison Pastoral Care for 20 years, involved with the treatment of prisoners. Now, it's a happy coincidence that in November, the American Society of Criminology will be meeting in San Francisco. They are the important criminological association of the world, actually. Many people have joined the American Society and come annually to their meetings, which are about 10,000 people. San Francisco has its own sort of reputation, but one of its most important historic things is it was where the UN Charter was negotiated and was signed, and it was in the Grace Cathedral that it was, in fact, there was a ceremony to wish the UN well. So we're going back to the future and looking back to what the founders of the UN wanted, to create a peaceful, caring world. And what I have found personally is that a lot of principles that criminologists come up with are grounded in sort of basic ethical principles of almost all religions. Treating your neighbor as you would treat yourself, welcome the poor, welcoming the stranger, visiting the imprisoned, all the basic things that Christians do. I found that they're actually reflected in similar religions. It is said that 80% of people identify themselves with a religion, and I'm afraid that sometimes our wise friends, the criminologists, get some attention by legislators and in the academic areas, but often can't convince people to reduce the incarceration rate, for instance. We know that prisons are simply bad. They create worse people when they come out, and they cost a lot of money. And particularly in the United States, has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world.
Right.
And there are other countries which seem to be doing better in terms of less people in prison and less people getting rehabilitated and doing a better job. So I'm hoping that by going out to the religious communities, that they might take on some of these things. They do it anyway. I mean, this is we have religious peoples, yogis, priests, and nuns and pastors in prisons to try to help people get through this very difficult period of their lives. To get more people behind this so we can have prison reform. I understand there's a new prison reform bill passed by Congress. I think it's an excellent piece of legislation, but it needs more, and it needs people to help someone get going on a new life again. My thing is that basically a prisoner or an incarcerated person needs one person he can rely on and take him back on his new way of life.
So there needs to be mentoring of some kind or support.
Everybody needs a mentor. I mean, even you and I need somebody who can point out what we're doing wrong, and then stand by that person to help them along. And that's my theory.
It's a human thing, right? Very much.
Rather than making a prison guard who may have a high school education and not much more in charge of 20 or 30 people who will be violent. Let's try to bring in some good people from society to release them into some kind of a role system with a mentor. So that's one of the things that we will be talking about. Basically, we want to talk about empathy and responsibility to other people. We want to talk about openness to the foreigner. We want to talk about good governance, in other words, corruption and bad legislators. We want to talk about the virtues, honesty, the basic things that make good people.
Coming back down to, the topic for this event, this annual meeting of ACS is spirituality for justice, and you're using the 75th, its 75th meeting to highlight this important relationship with spirituality, between criminology and spirituality. Are there specific objectives of this that are there? Is it to get criminologists more aware of how religion can support? Is it to get religions more engaged in what have traditionally, for example, in the UN arena, become more the work of criminologists, or it's seen to be that way? What are some of the big picture objectives that you have?
I think you've hit them both. I mean, it's both ways. I mean, I think criminologists do understand what makes criminals, and they do have good solutions. But when they deliver them to the legislator, they fall flat because no one wants to pay money for that kind of thing. And the other way around, I think, religious people have to get these insights. So it's sensitizing both groups. What we hope will happen is that the so-called San Francisco Declaration, which will simply be a listing of principles, maybe 25 principles.
So that's an outcome that you're hoping for of this.
From this dialogue between criminologists. Okay. That will go to the UN. It will go first to the UN Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, and then pass on to what's called the UN Congress, which is an international world thing, where again it'll open for discussion. None of this will be fixed in stone until it comes back to New York to the General Assembly in 2021. So it's a 2-year event, a 2-year journey, where we'll start it in San Francisco with 4 different working groups.
Okay.
And I think at this point, almost anyone is welcome to join, both people who will have a religious grounding, but also students, people who are interested in criminology, people who see that this marriage is something worthwhile pursuing, would be welcome to come.
Okay, so just again, so you're saying the journey starts in San Francisco, so to speak. Of course, people need to prepare before then, and there are working groups, and I'll ask you some questions about that in a moment. But just the big picture journey is there'll be a San Francisco Declaration from November that will be agreed upon at some level. Then it'll go to the Crime Commission next year. I mean, it's already next year. I mean, no, it'll go to the Crime Congress, the 2020 Crime Congress. Is that correct?
Yeah, but before that, this spring, there will be a discussion in Vienna about this project, and of course, also we will be the language of the proposed San Francisco Declaration will also be worked on. I mean, we don't have all the answers, and of course, there are many smaller objectives which could be brought in. So it's open until San Francisco.
So you corrected me. There'll be some discussions going on during this year's Crime Commission in May in 2019. There will be the event itself in San Francisco, November 2019. And from there, the San Francisco Declaration, however it takes shape by that time, which will be the culmination of those 4 working groups that you mentioned before, will then be taken to the Crime Congress in Japan of 2020. And then as an outcome from the Crime Congress, it gets sent back to the United Nations General Assembly after it's been adopted in the Crime Congress. Then it comes back, I guess, through ECOSOC and into the General Assembly after that. So it's quite a journey of words. But in the meantime, there's probably quite some effort and journeys of individuals in the work of putting all of that together and figuring it out together and getting that information then back into their own organizations and work on the ground. Is that kind of a big picture of what's going on?
That's a big picture, and of course we will try to involve Pope Francis and the Metropolitan of Moscow and Islamic leaders, as well as perhaps the Dalai Lama, to also give a word of encouragement. We hope to have at least the Deputy UN Secretary General with us in San Francisco, and look forward to a message from Mr. Gutierrez himself. So we hope to get some political backing for these thoughts along the way.
So that we can just bring this quickly back to what, anybody who happens to be listening to this, and we'll, make it available wherever it is that we can. If somebody says, yes, I would like to keep in touch with what's going on specifically on this agenda, and or read more about it, and or possibly join one of the working groups, and or attend the San Francisco meeting in, I guess that's November 12th through 13th of this year. Right. How would an individual who is not connected with you yet, other than they've seen you, how would they find out what's going on and where they can connect?
Well, I'm afraid I'll have to say it will be me for a little bit longer, because I've not yet found chairs for these working groups. We do have the rooms at the Marriott Hotel given to us by the ACS, reserved for the working groups, and we do have the cathedral itself reserved for the 13th. So the arrangements, the physical arrangements have been made, but I'm hoping there will be people in San Francisco who can take over many of these tasks, and as I said, chair some of the working groups. We have ideas, but we are now in January, and we do have 11 more months. So I hope that there will be people emerging.
And this is a part of the effort, is to find some of those people who might emerge. So again, just very quickly, the 4 working groups, from what I understand, one is on empathy and social justice. Is that correct?
That's empathy, social justice, right?
One on nonviolence and
punishment. Yes. What kind of punishment is appropriate, or perhaps no punishment for? Well, I don't even call them crimes. Some sort of social deviance. Okay.
Right. The whole discussion is going to be addressed in that working group, I would assume.
right,
Fine.
right.
And then, so that's the second one. Then there's good governance and character education.
Yeah, and that deals with all the things about honesty and corruption and how we delay our gratification and how we can we prevent greed, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's the preventive side.
Good governance also means that you get punished for being a corrupt official.
Yep.
And that's a very important element, that you can't have the whole system can break down if you have bad officials.
And then the fourth one is restorative justice and addressing mass incarceration. Anyway, I guess those topics are still being worked on in terms of the titles, or
yes, they're given its polar opposites, so that you have good governance, but also corruption on the other side. You have punitiveness and freedom. So obviously you have to find a middle way. And this is a field where punishment or controls are needed. We're not saying that everybody's good and it should be chaos. We have an ordered society, and we want to have a generous, good society, but we don't want to have people running around killing each other or wounding or hurting each other. So how do we set this medium, I think, is the important thing. And that's why in each of the working groups, I think we have to deal with the good and the evil. And where do we set it, and how do we get people to be on the good track?
Articulate that, and how do we deal with it? And right. So we've covered most of it that gives everybody a broad understanding of what's going on. I think one place where there can be a known resource, and I'll put that information at the bottom. It'll probably be right below this video as we speak, which will be on the Alliance website. That will be at least one beginning place for information to either the working groups, to you, etc., etc.
Well, thank you very much. We do hope that a number of NGOs, because they've been fighting in the fields for a long, long time, will join us in this campaign, and it'll be an opportunity to become more visible about experiments that they've tried and think work. We do think we will publish some materials. We certainly will publish a list of religious texts which relate to these four topics, so that you'll see that it's not just a Christian-based thing. We go beyond organized religion. We certainly look at the faith of the First Nations, or individuals, people who are doing good things, who may not be organized in a typical religious church way. So we're open at this point. I think it can be driven a lot by the NGOs that we do have, who've been working for decades on these problems, but maybe have not been heard. So this is an opportunity for the Alliance the individual NGOs in the Alliance, to get their work better known, and form alliances with other NGOs, and tell their stories to criminologists and practitioners.
So as a again, I thank you very much for going over this. It's helped clarify things for me, and I'm sure it'll help clarify for others. And also it'll create a little baseline for us, so that when we are able to have another discussion in a couple of months, we'll be able to see what has evolved since then. But in the meantime, I think if we have at the Alliance website, cpcjalliance.org/spirituality-justice, can be a page that we can have as a resource for anybody who wants to go there and maybe it'll become irrelevant later on, but in the meantime, that can be the place where people can get basic information about what's going on.
Thank you so much, Karen. This really helps us out and gives us a good kickstart for the new year. And
yes.
I think we'll be moving a little bit faster in January, February.
We'll need to. November may sound like a long way away, but it goes very, very quickly.
It's not, and people are demanding things of me right now.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for interviewing me and giving this campaign a kickstart.
Thank you very much, Michael.